or both. Deliberating in a couple of weeks to that end, but we certainly will be working with Horizons around the...
This has come from a number of conversations and hui, based from the... thought we had a bit more time to...
Okay, I'll pause.
Okay.
Hey, Julie. Yeah, tēnā kora, far away.
Yeah.
Hey.
So we've been working with a collective of different organisations around Whanganui to pull together a food rescue, Kai rescue program. This has come from a number of conversations and hui, based from the food insecurity experiences that came out of the COVID-19 lockdown. And yeah, so we've been sorry, I cycled here, catching my breath.
Yeah, that's right, that's right.
Would you like to?
Yeah.
Please do.
So Whanganui doesn't have a food rescue initiative, whereas a lot of the towns around New Zealand do. So that's a food rescue program is collecting food from supermarkets and other food businesses that would otherwise give it to pig farmers or throw it in the bin needlessly. And we want to rescue that and collect it in a centralised food hub. So the food hub has heaps of potential to bring the community together, to offer food to people that are in need of it, but also just that where we can redistribute it across the community. It can also be a place to learn how to cook and to share cooking skills. It can be a place where we can bring in other services, so people can meet there and have their budgeting meetings there, or the koha shed could get involved.
So this is surplus food on your trees at home, or is it rescuing from the end of a day at restaurants and the like, or both? Both of that?
Yeah, so this would be, usually food rescue organisations collect from supermarkets as well as major distributors around the country, but this would also be a hub where people could bring in surplus from their gardens, which is exciting. Cool. So it's slightly different to models around the country, but it's just, there's so much potential here because nothing is like really a centralised food rescue hub. And there's lots of different models that we're pulling from across the country, like Just Zilch in Palmerston North, Kaibosh in Wellington, Kiwi Hubs in Auckland. Joe's been working with, what was it called in Edinburgh?
We set up Food Sharing Scotland based on a German model in Edinburgh, and we're running the Edinburgh branch of that, which was collecting a few tonnes a month from local businesses and giving it back to people in the community. We weren't means testing that as well, so that was just straight up redistribution, and whoever could use it. And the kind of point was waste minimisation. So currently, as you see in our application, something around 30% of the waste stream in Aotearoa is organics and food. And so that was a big push for us in Edinburgh, as well as the carbon figures associated with that. So we can use the Scottish Government's carbon accounting models over here and apply the same logic. It's pretty much a multiplier of the weight of food saved, and that translates to methane and greenhouse gas emissions.
So the Waste Minimisation Board of the Council has given us some funding to carry out a feasibility study, which Joe and I are in the middle of. So we have 10 weeks to do that, and we're in week 3. So that involves stakeholder mapping, understanding where the food's going to be coming from, where the food's going to be going to. We're currently looking for a space that has access for trucks and forklift use, and a space where we can have a commercial kitchen where we can cook up the food. We also have a composting partner, Easy Earth, in town, who will take all of the food that can't be eaten. So that's what we're hoping to, that's our ask from you guys, is whether you know of any spaces where this initiative could really take off. It's really supporting the council's waste minimisation KPIs, if you like, and also just a huge benefit for a food hub, a hub for the community centred around food, where food will either be free or in some sort of small reciprocal cost, or volunteer time and kind as well as supporting all the other social service organisations in the town. So what we'd be focusing on is perishable food. So I think there's a lot of, there might be agreements in place already for non-perishable food, cans and things, but we'd be picking up eggs, meat, milk, fruit and veg, and bread. So that's kind of the major plus of a food rescue organisation that takes on the liability of that type of food.
I'm guessing you'd be looking for a fairly central location to allow minimum of...
Many ideas.
Excellent. Councillor Baker Hogan has a question for you.
Thank you very much for your submission. It's great. It's certainly been in conferences. I've heard about this kind of work, and thank you for raising it to our community. I guess have you? It seems to me there's a number of organisations that could be involved in this with you, and obviously council could be helping in regard to a building or that type of thing, and possibly other areas. But we're hearing from places like the Impact Collective. We've got obviously waste. The waste minimisation working parties be able to help, and Safe for Whanganui, Sustainable Whanganui, and Whanganui Community Foundation in regard to funding comes into mind. Have you been, and sorry, I haven't read every word of your submission, my apologies, but I did read your submission in general. Have you been have you been in contact with those kind of organisations, and have you looked at, just seeing Whanganui Community Foundation in regard to funding could be quite a, it really seems to sit well into their key areas.
Yeah, so I had a chat with Stephen Brandon about having some support from them, as well as a few other organisations around town, like the Rotary and some other organisations, about what we're up to, and there's a lot of support in those places. With the Community Foundation, they have the two different funds, and for their bigger fund, which is what we'd probably be looking at to kick off something of this scale, the specific targets that they're looking at are not fully aligned with what we're doing, because we're working holistically, and they're quite targeted around youth at risk or elderly in isolation, and we would of course be working on those problems, but not specifically enough to kind of go through their mechanisms. However, their quick relief fund would be something that they've indicated already that they'd be we'd be fitting quite well with. So there's lots of different funding streams that we'll be looking at, but to try and spread that load for this initial setup, then that's what we're kind of approaching council for on that level. Yeah.
And Sustainable Whanganui is hosting us as we begin, in terms of them being our host charity to receive funds and be the trust, because we don't have charitable status yet, and that's something we'd be working towards. But they're hosting us, as well as our steering group that involves people from Thrive and from Te Ranganui and from council and from a few community churches, and so we have an incredible team behind us, which is very encouraging.
Fantastic. I'd still suggest really keep on to that Whanganui Community Foundation. I hear about those targets, but I think the whole whānau ora approach, that if you working with a family rather than a youth, a person, could make a big difference to being able to get a substantial grant possibly for them for the long term. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
I won't voyage down your suggestion of a tax on empty buildings, but thank you for that idea. It's probably not within our aegis. I'm not sure if we can do that, but it's worth considering. So
Worked for us in Edinburgh.
Is it? Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you both. Good to see you. I hope you've caught your breath. And I've no doubt we'll see you again. Thanks for being part of the democratic process.
Thank you very much.
I'm just trying to manage this together.